A turning point in the Vietnam War took place in January, February of 1968 with the Tet Offensive. Anti-war sentiment in the United States was swelling in late 1967, and to try and keep a lid on opposition sentiment, President Johnson and his administration embarked on a kind of pep talk campaign for the American people. The message to the American people was that we've almost got the communists licked, and this war is almost over. The enemy, in fact, was laying in wait, and so January 31st, 1968, the North Vietnamese and their Vietcong allies launched a massive countrywide assault on both American and South Vietnamese military and government installations. And the hope of the enemy with this offensive was that the people would join them and rise up, a mass uprising, to evict what they saw as this American invader in their country. So the American people, having just been told that the war is almost over, are now treated on the nightly news to images of fighting in the American embassy compound in Saigon, to images of great carnage at the Marine base at Khe Sanh, at the imperial city of Hue. People are thinking this war is not over, we've been lied to, we've been had, and public opinion started to tank. In Vietnam, this really unnerved American soldiers, and the knowledge that the enemy had been able to orchestrate this offensive without any awareness on the part of the United States was deeply disturbing to soldiers who were trusting that the guys in charge know what they're doing. They were enduring very harsh conditions in terms of rain and mud and sleeping outside and not eating hot meals. And they were experiencing casualties, but not casualties due to enemy engagement. They were getting picked off by snipers or by booby traps or by injuries. And there's a great sense of frustration that they can't find the enemy. They don't have anybody to blame. First Platoon and perhaps the company as a whole were not particularly well led. There's evidence from that February 1968 of a breakdown in discipline. But what we see of Charlie Company in the month of February and the early weeks of March 1968 is a group of soldiers starting to unravel. So when they were charged with this operation to go into My Lai, which the military referred to as Pinkville, tensions were very, very high. Vietnamese villages are actually complexes of little hamlets, and this village was to the Vietnamese known as Son My. My Lai was just one of several hamlets in Son My village. In fact, everyone agrees that the first shots fired at My Lai were against an old man who was farming, and when the helicopters came in, he waved at them, and they shot him. The fog of war is often invoked for what came after, that maybe some soldiers heard shots and interpreted that as enemy fire, but they basically moved the 150 meters from the landing zone into the village and continued firing at any Vietnamese person they saw. At one point, a large group of civilians was gathered in the irrigation ditch, about 170 people. Calley told some of his soldiers to take care of them. So these guys are standing there watching these villagers, and Calley came back after a while and said, "I thought I told you to take care of them." And they said, "We're watching them, we're guarding them." And he said, "No, I meant kill them." There was one instance where a helicopter landed and interceded. There was a helicopter piloted by a man named Hugh Thompson, and he had a good view of what was going on underneath him. And he saw American soldiers shooting at women and children. And he landed near the ditch and put his ship in between American guns and Vietnamese civilians. He managed to pick up around 20 people and loaded them on his helicopter and carried them to safety.